The United States government has reached a new landmark. $18 trillion in debt. That's 18 with 12 zeros after it. Each one is a million millions. It took us 205 years to reach our first trillion of debt, but only about 400 days to reach the most recent one. So we're getting better at it. Is it real money anyway though? Such a large sum. Feels more like Monopoly money. And we know we can't pay it back. So do we have to? Don't we expect that we'll just have to default eventually? I've heard a lot of people say that. Or should we do what Zimbabwe did when it got to be $4 trillion for a cup of coffee? We can just erase some zeros, bring it down to a number that we can get our head wrapped around. Some people have suggested that we could just default. Just default. Or we could selectively default. That sounds so intelligent. We can have a controlled bankruptcy. So who should we default to? How about China? We owe them a couple trillion. We've been complaining about their human rights abuses. We could just say, you know, you really don't deserve to get your money back anyway, so all of those loans that we took out, well, just to teach you a lesson, we won't pay them back. Except that we would start a global financial crisis and we would lose credibility worldwide. Probably not a good idea. If we don't want to destroy our global credibility, there's always the money that we owe to ourselves. And what is a loan to yourself anyway? I mean, is it real? People don't actually expect to get their Social Security checks, do they? Oh yeah, they do. Well, there is this matter of these Federal Reserve notes, which are issued by the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. The Federal Reserve Bank would go defunct if we were to default on ourselves, creating an instant currency crisis. Probably not the best idea either. Well, can we get it under control? I mean, politicians are always saying they're going to have balanced budgets. Historically speaking, there isn't a lot of precedent to back that up. 1957 in the Eisenhower administration was the only year that the US national debt actually decreased. Other than that, the precedent has been that each administration outspends the one before. So Bush outspent Clinton, Obama outspent Bush. So I don't really care whether politicians are Republicans or Democrats. And I don't see any reason to expect that it should change unless somehow we have a politician whose actions actually line up with his or her words. This is the way of superpowers throughout history, that they get accustomed to spending beyond their means, and this is where they take us. Here's another way to solve it. We just raise taxes and cover it that way. I can't imagine what those tax rates would have to be, one, but second, no matter what tax rates have been, they've only been able to collect 17% of the people's income as revenue. People just go under, they go to the black market, they stop working, whatever the case may be. Unless people are slaves, generally, they like to receive the majority of the fruit of their labor. Regardless, and it's not going to control the debt. But we are going to have to pay the piper. I don't know what it's going to look like. There are a lot of variables involved. People have different theories about this. I went to see Peter Schiff recently. I respect him a great deal, but his take was that we would raise interest rates again, like happened in the late 70s. I don't see that happening personally. Paul Volcker did that. He was unpopular for doing so. This was the guy who cut off the booze at the party. I don't see anyone in power right now who would be willing to make that sort of tough call. So I expect that they will just keep quantitative easing. As Richard Nixon said, we're all Keynesians now. John Maynard Keynes came up with a brilliant system so that governments didn't have to live on a mere 17% of the people's income. That's what our government has been doing. And they only have a one-button solution for everything now, which is quantitative easing. Printing money, and that's what they do when they can't pay their bills. They just print more money. It's as though there's a giant pizza that represents all the money, and they just keep cutting it into smaller and smaller pieces, which is what inflation is. So this automatically becomes worth less in all of our pockets. So I believe that they will continue to print money until this becomes worth what its inherent value is, which is paper and ink. And that has historically been the way that it's gone. This looks awfully reminiscent of, say, the Roman Empire. We are overextended militarily, massive amounts of debt, a huge entitlement population. We are at a 36-year low for the labor force participation rate. All of these things appear to be pointing us in one direction, and that is that we need to create wealth. We need to be productive citizens who know how to create wealth, whether that's goods and services or in commodities, oil, food. This is not real wealth. Provided that we're prepared, we should be able to rise like the phoenix out of the ashes. Thanks for watching.